כל האוניברסיטה אודיוורסיטי.
Audioversity, the voice of Reichman University.
In my eyes, testimonies that are being made in a respectful way, even in the worst or the most difficult stories, there is something positive about it because the survivor sat and decided to speak and was treated in a respectful way. It's his choice, his or her choice to speak. I see it as a humanistic approach, in a way, an antidote for the violence that surrounds us in media.
Welcome to Raw, a podcast where we confront the complexities of war from the inside out. I'm Anouk, a journalist, author, yoga teacher, and meditation practitioner. Raw, or war spelled backwards, symbolizes how many of us feel in the face of the Israel-Gaza conflict, exposed, vulnerable, and seeking understanding. Here, we don't just discuss the external battles, but dive deep into our internal struggles, examining how this violence has shaken our very core. Join me in conversations with philosophers, psychologists, and spiritual leaders as we explore how to navigate these painful times with wisdom and resilience, finding guidance for our own paths through this raw, unfiltered world. On October 8th, Ohad Ufaz, an award-winning filmmaker and documentarian, led a team of 400 filmmakers and mental health professionals to undertake an extraordinary mission, starting the thoughtful and arduous process of recording video testimonies from survivors of the October 7th massacre. With years of experience in storytelling and a deep commitment to social impact, Ohad knew this had to be done with the utmost moral, professional, and emotional responsibility. In this episode of Raw, Ohad shares his personal journey, the challenge and privilege of documenting these deeply intimate and traumatic stories, and the delicate balance between preserving history and supporting survivors. We explore how this critical work not only safeguards the truth, but also serves as a powerful tool for healing and resilience, offering hope in the face of unimaginable loss. Ohad, welcome to Raw. How are you today?
I'm okay. I mean, comparing to the situation, which is so hectic and changing so rapidly, trying to follow. So I think I'm good.
I just made the mistake of asking the question that I tell these days that people aren't allowed to ask, which is, how are you? You know, you say to people, I hope, or you sign emails, you say, in general, I would say, I hope you're well, you know, and now I have to add, considering the circumstances. And, you know, these days when people ask me, how are you? I want to say, like, why are you asking me that question? What kind of question is that? How dare you? It's a very complex question that only me and my therapist are allowed to think about. You know, I'm just diving straight in here. So tell me a little bit about Edut 710. What was the seed for it? Is it something where immediately, like on October 7th, as you realized what was happening, or, you know, in the days that followed, you kind of knew in your being that this is what you had to do?
I'm a documentary filmmaker, so our instinct is when anything which is historical that happens, we would like to grab our gear and to run and to document the history as it evolves. Okay, that this
When
is the
everybody's running away, you're running towards.
Yes, but I'm not a journalist, so not as fast. I would
Mm-hmm.
try to do it in a moderate way, trying to better observe and listen. On September 2023, I joined a group of videographers who documented the protest
Protest
against the
movement, which was
government.
against the judicial overhaul, etc.
Yes. I also joined it because I believed in it, but also it was fascinating for me to join a group of independent media makers co-creating media. Because it's fascinating for me to put the ego aside and then to do something together. And I wanted to give them tools to express themselves cinematically. So we had a couple of meetings and I gave lectures. I love to teach. And we were prepared to film, to document the protest on 7th of October, on Saturday evening demonstrations. And then the news from the South came. So most of them, like I said, wanted to grab the gear because it was ready and run to wherever the survivors went to and start meeting with them and documenting whatever is possible. And I have many other colleagues from the field of documentary filmmaking and teaching. And because they knew my background in making of testimony media projects and teaching testimony, they asked me how should we do it, and I felt that my purpose is to hold, to tell them and myself to calm the instinct, and because this situation needs another approach. Dori Laub, which is one of the main inspiration for Edut 710, he interviewed Holocaust survivors 35, 40, 50 years after the Holocaust. So they had time to process, although many of them didn't because they actually oppressed it and didn't speak at all. Also, Natal, which is another organization that deals with victims of terror attacks, of traumatic events, their protocol is to give treatment, but then to interview, take testimonies only a year after the event. But here, what we found out is that people were shouting, screaming their testimonies already from the safe rooms, already from the fields around the Nova Festival, then while from a pit in the ground while they were running away. Testimony became, and media in general became much more rapid. People don't wait. It's almost as if the struggle over the truth, over testimony, lead people to record reality and record the crimes as it happens, because they already knows as viewers that someone would might deny, that there will be denial and silencing or fatigue, and they would like to record it as close to the events as possible and as authentic as possible, because they're already in a struggle. So we see people from the Nova filming the situation, this incredible, unbelievable living hell or historical hell as it happens. And for us as listeners, if someone just expresses his experience to the media with no one listening, it's a dangerous situation. We know nothing how people would react. So it's a very, very unprotected way to express pain. And we would like to be there to listen to them, to be attentive. We also consulted with trauma experts. I think in Israel we have, unfortunately, plenty of experience and plenty of experts. Um, One of them was Muli Lahad. He was Professor Muli Lahad was the one to establish the resilience centers in Kiryat Shmona and the area already in the 80s, when there were many rockets already back then. And it's my area as well. I grew up north, so I had the chance to meet with him in my youth and listen to his lectures and learning breathing and calming myself. And he became a world-known trauma expert, and he approved the ideas that I took from Dori Laub. He said, "You had a good teacher. You can use it." But then he and other experts asked us to be even more protective, in a sense that Laub had to make people recall their memories many years later. And also because that generation of Holocaust survivors, it was a much more ideological generation with a social point of view. So they didn't count themselves. They thought about themselves as group of survivors or group of Jewish people from certain town and so on. So when he needed the testimony, and a testimony has to be a very, very personal story, way of speaking. So he had to connect them to their personal memory and sometimes to the most painful memories. But we had to be more protecting because it was
Raw.
so raw, so close to the events. Usually you talk about the post trauma, you deal with post trauma, but now we're in the midst of trauma, and that can do greater harm. So then we built the protocol and we followed Laub's legacy. He would begin his interviews asking the survivors, first of all, tell me about yourself, because you meet with a person and not with an event. So we asked, tell us, when did you arrive to Sderot or Ofakim or to the kibbutz, to the area, or were you born there? And then Laub would ask, tell me about the period when the sky was still blue. This is the
Mm.
metaphor he used. It's a very European metaphor. In Edut 710, we would ask people to, first of all, recall the week before, and the best would be to recall what happened on 6th of
Mm.
October 2023. In many settlements, it was Simchat Torah parties or the kibbutz. I don't know why, but in many kibbutzim, Simchat Torah, the end of Sukkot, is we call it the kibbutz festival, Chag HaMeshek,
Mm-hmm.
the event for the settlement to be established. So in actually now I can recall that in Be'eri and in Nachal Oz, both of the kibbutzim, they had a big party when all the community goes on stage and they prepare it for months. And many of them say we were so bothered about how many chairs and how many guests and how we will host people in the event and in October 7th, the day itself. That also one of the reasons there were so many guests in the area.
Mm.
And of course, the Nova Festival was part of Sukkot's festivities in Israel. So they really caught us in a happy hour. I mean, the Hamas, they knew exactly when to attack. And then after they would tell us the story of October 6th, they would go through the day, October 7th, and in some places the 8th. In some places it was for a few days, the attack. And then they would go through this with no interference. We would like not to direct them, not to ask questions, only help if it needed. And in, I think, more than 95% of the situation, it wasn't needed and still not needed to guide, especially through this very condensed day. The last guideline was to finish the interview when they are out from the battle zone.
Mm.
Because in trauma and in post trauma, what happens to survivors that they get stuck
Mm.
in the safe room or in the pit on the field, the attack of the Nova Festival. And we would like to make sure that they understand that they are now relatively safe. And the idea is, of course, to let them have control over the story and close it, and then to be able to go in their life. But of course, the situation is that it's an unfinished story because the war goes on and they couldn't go back to their houses until very very recently, and in some places they didn't up until now. And of course the hostages and many relatives that serves in the army, so the trauma goes on.
So how many people are part of your organizations? How many filmmakers? How many interviewers? And how do you train them?
We started as a small community of 30. We were chatting with on a WhatsApp group already on the 7th of October, and the first meeting was on the 8th. So very, very close to the event because we were already organized as a group that co-creates media. And since then, it grew rapidly, and many, of course, filmmakers, media makers joined, historians, academics, and therapists. Many therapists that joined. I think the motivation was to meet with the people, and in a way to, as we say in Hebrew, להשתתף בצער, to participate the sorrow, to give a metaphoric hug to these people and to be with them. So many people joined, and until today, more than a year afterwards, on the peak we were 400 volunteers, and we still volunteer up until now.
So it sounds like in some ways, I mean, it's interesting because, as a documentary filmmaker, I think of people who wanted to document something. And the primary motivation, or, at least the top priority, is not always the mental health of the people that you're interviewing. And it seems like in this case, it's almost like the instinct that came out even in the people who weren't necessarily therapists like you, who are filmmakers and takers of testimony, is that what you were looking for primarily is how can you help these people from a mental health point of view, using the camera and the ability to be a witness as a form of release, of healing, in the way, in any way that it's possible.
Taking care of the survivors is our main goal, and it goes both ways. First, to be with them, to be participants in their journey back to the most horrific experiences in their life, and on the other hand, to be those who would carry the testimony to the wide public. So they also count on us to film them, to show their eyes that expresses, or the silence also in between words, and to bring it to the wide public or next generations. And for me as a filmmaker, the idea that I can help contribute to the well-being of the survivor, to the well-being of the witness, is a great achievement. It's very very important for me, because otherwise I only there in order to record the crisis or the drama of the traumatic situation for the sake of the viewers. And with this approach, I might exploit the bad situation in which they are in. One of the heroes of Nahal Oz battle from the local unit, he came and he declared, I'm post-traumatic. I took a pill, and after I would testify, I would have a few nights that I won't be able to sleep because I reopen my wounds. But I insist on giving my testimony because I'm not a personal person anymore. I'm part of history, and I would like to be part of history, and I would like my experience to be shared. So, in years to come, when another person would have to protect his community, he would be able to learn from my experience. So, back to your question, it might start a rehabilitating process of processing memories, of taking these shattered experiences, wounded experience, and make it into a story. And then the survivor would gain agency and control over herself, of what she went through. But we can't promise this curing side of testimony. We promise that we make the testimony in the most considerate way. After some of our volunteers work with the communities, some of the communities approached us and asked us to come and film them on reconstruction of the events because they would like to understand better what happened because it was so complex. The communities asked us and almost pushed us, few of the communities, to go back to the settlements when it was still in danger, and the battles in Gaza and sometimes missiles and rockets would send over to the settlements. They would ask us to go back with them and film them in a filmic reconstruction. And that was something we avoided from asking because we thought it would put them in a trigger situation back to the trauma. But as we learned, for them giving testimony and risking with a trigger, it is something that was worthwhile for them because bringing the message to the world about what they went through, and also as a community to understand what happened, they had a will to pay the price. There was a woman we filmed in Nahal Oz. Her husband had his son's weapon at home that day, and he protected the house. They had guests, and at one point he invited Thai workers that he saw running outside. He invited them home, so he gathered a group of people that he protected. He would go on the house balconies and rooftop to shoot whoever would come close to the house. And he's part of the story of the civic fight for Nahal Oz. So when we went to film the reconstruction of the civic fight of Nahal Oz, she wanted to participate as well, and she went back to the house, which was, you could see bullet holes on the windows and on the walls. What I didn't tell is that at the end of 7th of October, this man, her husband, whom she loved in all her heart, he was killed by the IDF by mistake because they by mistake thought he was Hamas terrorist. And it was so important for her to participate and tell his story with a lot of pride, and to make sure that his story is part of history, and to tell it from her point of view, to unfold the tragedy. So she would perform the battle over the house, and you could see, if you go back to the material, that the cameraman had to follow her, and at one point she demonstrated the way she would crawl when she thought he got hit. She had to crawl when the IDF was shooting, and the bullets are from all windows through the house. And she did that because it was very, very important to her, painful as much as it was. So it's another situation from Holocaust survivors. I think already in the Holocaust, for many of the survivors, the will to testify was burning from inside. Not all of them, but many of them. But since there were for many years no one to listen, in parts of society, also in Israel, they were blamed for being too passive and they didn't fight. So many of them took silencing in and decided not to testify. And it nowadays we know already. I heard a trauma expert saying that also in empirical research shows that testimonies that are published in most of the cases help the recovery of the victims.
If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to Raw on your favorite podcast platform, leave a review, and share it with someone who might find it meaningful. You can also explore more about the show and subscribe to my newsletter at withanouk.com. What about the role of the people who are watching these videos? It's also very complicated because in many cases, the people who are watching the videos are Israelis or Jews around the world who, in some ways, from far or close, were very affected by the events of October 7th and maybe had kind of like secondary trauma, etc. And you see it all the time, in the last year, this kind of feeling of obligation on social media, also this need of people to watch and to share, the testimonies of the people who were there in that kind of like first line. And at the same time, there's talk as well telling people you don't have to force yourself to watch, the worst videos of that day and to kind of relive that day again and again. There's also a duty for some people, at least in this society, to continue to live, to function. Otherwise we all crumble if we all spend our time reliving that day and the trauma of others. So yeah, I wonder what you think is kind of like the role of the viewer, of the people who maybe were affected but cannot possibly begin to understand what it was like to be there. And do you caution people about watching these videos that you publish?
First of all, our testimonies, the testimonies that are being recorded and published by Adut 710, are not the most triggering video material. We don't show graphic material usually. It's mainly testimonies. And in my eyes, testimonies that are being made in a respectful way, even in the worst or the most difficult stories, there is something optimist or something positive about it because the survivor sat and decided to speak and was treated in a respectful way. It's his choice, his or her choice to speak. And I think something of this situation get across the screen to the viewers. This kind of documentation that is being recorded and being documented with the participation of the victims is in a way an antidote for the violence that surround us in media, in social media, in TV, in other channels, all channels of media, which is much more violence, dramatic, pushing. There is no time to absorb and to process it. I mean, it's so to the face and it pushes our limits. In Adut 710, we would push no one to speak if she or he are not ready. That's why we got to the most severe stories only now. We didn't run to, when the hostages would go back home or were released, the journalists would push them to give interviews. We would wait. And so with people who had severe loss, we would wait for them to decide whenever they would like, and most of them needed time. And some of the harshest stories get to us only now, a year after. And that was our part of our decision not to contribute this condensed, violent approach of media.
The word that comes to me is decency, and it's it's like some people say, I don't want to watch anything related to October 7th. It's too much. It's triggering, etc. And I think these people are referring to the kind of force feeding of horror, like of gore that that was going around, and in many ways is still going around on social media, and the divisiveness and the hatred. And on the other side of it, you have um, testimonies like the one you're presenting. And I love that you're saying that it's these people deciding how they want to speak and where they want to speak and where they want to sit. And, you know, I looked again at some of the videos on your website today. It's so, there is a reverence that you feel, almost something um, holy that speaks to the most decent and elevated side of humanity and of these people, that they can decide if they can be, sitting outdoors or indoors, or in their pajamas or with their face covered, or, the language that they want to speak in. And you see these people taking ownership over their own stories. And I was also surprised that I found it personally watching some of these videos. I found it, first of all, deeply, deeply moving. But also, it kind of gave me a sense of um, stepping into, or witnessing something deeply uh, uh, decent and compassionate, and um, and it actually stripped away all the noise that, me and everybody else. And, as a media person, also, I'm on my phone. I don't have a choice. I'm on social media. I consume it. I'm, without realizing, subconsciously, all these messages of divisiveness and dehumanization come in all the time. And I felt suddenly very quiet and calm in watching that. So, yeah, I can really understand what you're saying about the way in which you approach such a difficult subject. It makes all the difference.
First of all, thank you. I'm not in your position. I mean, you're you're an excellent viewer, and you expressed it. It's very important for us and for our volunteers to have the experience that you shared now. This is the intention, and I think our viewers are also listeners. The viewers is the goal for that. I mean, and not only it's not our goal, it's the witnesses' goal. They do it, they perform it because they would like to know that someone viewed the way you watched it and that you got it. I think without the viewers, without the audience, there is no point. Testimony has to get to the people that weren't there but are conscious about what happened there.
I always bring things back to parenting, because I have 3 young kids, and I'm so interested in the kind of psychology of children. And what I have learned is that, you know, kids can go through all kinds of experiences, some of them difficult and less difficult, and ultimately what they need at the end of any experience, from the most difficult ones, is for someone, it can be a parent or another caretaker, to say, "Wow, that really sounds hard." Not, "I'm going to fix it. Let me call, the mother of your friend to try to, talk to her or talk to the principal," or, so much of literature today says the most important is to, just being that person on the bench next to your child, quietly listening, or just saying, like, "Wow." that sounds difficult. I see you, I hear you. And when you talk about these people's need to share, it's such a primal human need. It's like as humans, we can go through so much, but if there's no one there to kind of listen and to say, I see you and I see your experience as being real, that's the ultimate trauma. And I think about those people who went through the worst possible imaginable situations, that we couldn't have even imagined in the worst horror movies. And the knowledge that so many around the world are delegitimizing or using their stories as political narratives.
I very much agree with your observe that it's a very deep human need to be listened to. And especially with survivors, the feeling of loneliness is very, very deep because we interviewed sometimes people who were together in the safe room, a husband and a wife or a kid, and each of them had a completely different experience of the same events. They tell the same events, but from a completely different angle. And if you don't get this approval, then you might feel it's only on in your head. It's very, very important.
One thing that I also realized today when I was watching some of these videos is that, October 7th, and we know it, is an event of such magnitude, and also so many, so many, so many people were hurt, kidnapped, wounded, killed, whatever, all the horrors imaginable, that it's hard sometimes to connect to the very real, individual, detailed realities that people went through. And in one of the videos that I saw today, it's this guy who talks about the fact that his daughter was in the safe room, and he was in the house trying to fight the terrorists off, and him and his wife were in the main room. And they talk about how their daughter, who's 6 years old, and I can connect to it because I have a 6-year-old daughter, is always, in general, she's always needy. She needs something. Abba, Ima, I need this. I need you to be with me. I need, like, she just doesn't want to play alone. And on that day, she created a hospital for her dolls in the mamad, and she was
Wow.
absolutely quiet for hours. And that detail just penetrated so deeply in me because it just I understood in that moment what that little girl must have understood herself in order to completely be quiet in that room with her dolls. And then there was another guy that you filmed, or someone in Edut's 710 filmed, who recounts being in the mamad with his wife and daughter and fighting off the terrorists for many, many hours. Um, and he had his face covered during the interview. You can just see his eyes. And, as opposed to some of the most, gory videos, again, we can talk about those horrible videos from those first videos that I think in a way kind of disconnected us from the reality of it because they're so extreme. This man, and just seeing his eyes and the expression and the emotion and the trauma in his eyes, it just became much clearer. It kind of stripped away the noise and the difficulty comprehending, understanding. Um, how do you protect your mental health when faced with so much of it? Because I mean, I saw a few videos today, but I don't know how I would fare if I had to deal with witnessing these videos every day for a year. Have you found your mental health affected in any way? How do you deal with it? How do you protect yourself?
First of all, we have therapists in the organization, and they take care of us, and they make group talks, and they warn us from working too much and so on. But for me, I find it as a comfort, as something I can do in this dehumanizing situation we're over a year now in, when there is so much hate and violence. And I mean, it's an incredible war here, on all sides, when there is so much death, and human life and human situation doesn't count, and you can do something, some kind of humanistic approach to people, to victims, and to be with them. I find that it give me energy, that it uplifting me a little bit. And it's not only for me. People here for more than a year, more than 350 people who volunteer here, and in a tough economical situation, they give hours and days, because we feel that it gives us some kind of believe that there is a possibility for good, to meet with people, to be in a situation of giving. And as I said, whenever I stop and I get back to the news, it hits me so hard that I have to go back to Edut 710 and look for the way to cope.
As someone who is documenting now the horrors that people in Israel have gone through, do you, think about Palestinians and, the death and destruction over there? I mean, again, I assume documentary filmmakers all over the world are, have that instinct that you talk about of wanting to go um, and give space and voices to these, you know, tens of thousands of people and their stories. Is that too kind of triggering or too difficult for you to think about, or is it something that you grapple with?
Oh, I think a lot about what they are going through. I think it's another side of the dehumanization and violence, the tragedy that they are going through. Of course, as Israeli, it's not my role to be there as listener, and I don't think they would accept me. They would feel that I'm patronizing,
Of
and
course.
so. But I had, during, first of all, as a teacher, there are testimony programs that I lead in Oranim. Um, and there are people from up north, from northern Israel, from kibbutzim, towns, Arab cities, and villages, and we ask them to bring testimonies from their families and communities, and all these testimonies are to meet in the classroom. And to be an Arab in Israel even is a very demanding and challenging situation nowadays. I had the opportunity to lead a group of Arab and Israeli, Palestinian and Jewish people in Nofa Galil, which is the Israeli side of Nazareth. It's a community leaders from the city, Jews and Arabs, that trying to work through living together. And I had the opportunity to lead testimony documentation workshop with them, also during that year, and it was incredible for me. I mean, to listen, especially to the other side, to what Arab citizens are going through, their fear, their being stuck in between their Palestinian identity, and of course identifying with the people in Gaza or in Lebanon, and on the other hand see the victims of the Hamas attack on Israel, and identify also with Israelis, and to be considered as traitors by the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, and to be inside enemies Israeli point of view.
Are you working on any other projects at the moment? Can you share?
First of all, the listener, the film that followed Dory Laub in his last 4 years and bring his personal story and his concept of listening and testimony was just premiered on Haifa Film Festival. It tells the story of Laub, but also the influence and the legacy and the inspiration that Edut 710 got from Dory Laub. So now I would like to show the film and bring this idea to as many people as possible in Israel and abroad. I think, although it's a very difficult topic and it's a difficult knowledge to cope with, it gives some kind of comfort. There is something to do afterwards. Listening is a way to deal with it. And not only on a personal level, but also as a society and as culture and on the cultural level.
You talked about the kind of international arena and wanting to bring your film on the international arena, so I want to touch on that a little bit. I have a friend that I grew up with, in went to Jewish school together, and he became a very respected actor in Belgium and in France. And I recently found out that he signed a letter with 500 Belgian artists demanding the boycott of Israeli cultural institutions. And Israeli cultural institutions would probably include the Haifa Film Festival. And I assume that as a filmmaker and as a teacher, you have, worked abroad. You probably know other filmmakers abroad. How has this past year affected, first of all, your professional life when it comes to the international sphere, and maybe personal relationships with people outside of Israel?
For me, the 7th of October was okay. You have to hold everything and focus back on your society. The crisis, it was even before the political crisis, the social crisis, the cultural crisis is so deep. We have to first of all take care of what happens here. So my focus is very much on Israel now. But I think boycotting is adding violence to violence. If you stop yourself from looking at this complex society, there are people here who are very much against the war and against violence. And if you boycott everybody in order to simplify the situation, and it's easier to see black and white situation, I think it's adding another layer of hate to this big successful wave of hatred that is all over us. So I assume it will be very difficult. Uh, we almost finished the listener before 7th of October, and we were just about to publish. And I think it was easier for people abroad to have the film, to watch the film, the story of Dori Laub, listening. He listened, of course, his initiative with Holocaust survivors, but he in one of the workshops in the film, which is an important part of the film, he leads a workshop of my student, and he interviews third generation and Nakba. I don't know if the word is survivor, but her grandparents fled from El Birwe up north. And what happens is that this Palestinian girl, for the first time, consider her situation when this old Holocaust survivor interviews her and, in a way, shows her the way to listen to herself. It's an incredible scene. So the film was much easier for wider for public abroad, but we insisted on bringing the story of Adut 710 also in the film because it shows that according Laub, and he was a Zionist, he believed in Israel, but he also believed that even if it's not so comfortable to listen to a Palestinian, he would do that because it's a humanistic demand, and he has to listen to her and to everyone who went through a historical crisis. The tool of testimony would be of a need, but then to show that his legacy is so important in this situation of the survivors of the 7th of October attack. It was so important for us. And I know that it might close some audiences for the film and for its very important message. But we felt, it's not only me, I have to say, I made the film with the filmmaker, co-directed the film with Micha Livne. So it was so important for us to bring it to the situation of today, not to leave it back to the Holocaust and not even to the Nakba or to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from the past, but to show how important it is for now and how relevant it is for the Ukraine or for what would happen now probably in Syria. It's very important and extremely relevant.
Ohad, thank you so much for your time.
It was really great to meet and to try to spread out this message. So thank you.
That's it for today. Thank you for listening to Raw. You can subscribe on any podcast platform and join our community at withanuke.com. Share this episode if it resonated with you, and I'll see you next time.